Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
UK animal welfare standards could be under threat after Brexit if farmers are left to compete against cheaper, less regulated rivals from outside the European Union. That's according to a House of Lords committee, who say the government must insist on similar standards in any new trade agreements to avoid a race to the bottom on welfare. Duncan Kennedy reports.
It's one of Britain's premier showcases for agriculture. 100,000 people admiring 2,000 animals. All part of an industry where animal welfare is paramount.
Today you've got dairy shorthorns.
But farmers like Mike Smales are worried about what might happen after Brexit. He says if we start importing food from countries with lower standards, it may be cheaper, but animal welfare could suffer.
How cheap can food get? You have to ask that question, and this downward spiral in expecting food to keep getting cheaper and cheaper, I think is a bit naive.
But the government said today farmers shouldn't worry about animal welfare after Brexit, as Britain will keep what it calls our gold standard policies.
Any future arrangements covering trade in animals, or trade in anything for that matter, will be subject to the UK Parliament.
But some people say they don't just have concerns about animal welfare after Brexit. Campaign groups say they're also worried about food safety levels in some countries. Food that could be exported to Britain.
Processing plants use a variety of interventions.
They point to American practices like washing poultry in chlorine to kill bacteria, which they say would be unacceptable to British consumers. Although others say it's patronising to dismiss safety standards in countries like the United States.
Why would American food producers produce food that kills or injures or makes ill the people who eat that food? It's not really a very sensible business proposition.
It won't just be American farmers trying to get a foothold in Britain after Brexit. Today's report says it'll be down to consumers to decide how much they want to pay for high-quality food. Well, you only have to come to shows like this in the New Forest to see that Britain really does have world-class animal welfare standards. These are dairy longhorns, just one of the breeds here on show at the New Forest show. And just last week, the Environment Secretary, Michael Gove, said that those animal welfare standards would be maintained after Brexit. But Britain could soon be signing a series of trade deals with countries outside the European Union. So really, the issues of welfare, safety and prices are paramount.
Duncan Kennedy, thank you.
This capital city is buzzing tonight with vicious intrigue and raw politics. The president is at daggers drawn with the man he appointed Attorney General, Jeff Sessions. The issue, of course, is Russia. Donald Trump cannot forgive Mr. Sessions for accusing himself from an FBI inquiry into any Russian meddling in last year's election. An inquiry which, if you're looking from the White House, is ever expanding. Cue a volley of angry tweets from the president against a member of his own cabinet this week, calling the Attorney General weak and beleaguered. All this on the very day he's struggling to get a major piece of legislation on reforming healthcare through Congress. And into this maelstrom walks the British International Trade Secretary Liam Fox. He wants a big agreement with the United States. He needs it desperately if Brexit is to be a success. President Trump rolled out senior Republicans to meet Dr. Fox, including the House Speaker Paul Ryan. But when Trump tweets that a UK trade deal is big and exciting, who does he mean will benefit? Before we came on air, I spoke to Liam Fox about Trump, trade and, yes, chicken. We'll hear his thoughts in a moment, but first, the big picture of what's at stake.
At 4:16 a.m. this morning, the President of the United States' Twitter account enthused over Liam Fox's visit. Our special relationship with the UK is going to be even better. The US Trade Representative and UK's Liam Fox met today to begin new chapter for stronger trade. A few hours later, so too did @Real Donald Trump. Working on major trade deal with the United Kingdom could be very big and exciting. Jobs. The EU is very protectionist with the US. Stop. Today there was good economic news for the government at home. BMW announced that it will build the fully electric version of the Mini at its Cowley plant near Oxford.
Welcome to town.
But what of a deal with the US? The mood music may be positive, but Washington has long-standing gripes with EU restrictions that they'd like rid of. First, there's what's been called chlorination chicken. The US want to sell us birds washed in chlorine. They insist they do not pose a health risk to consumers. Then there's hormone-boosted beef that the US insists is safe for consumers. The US wants to be able to sell us whiskey aged less than 3 years. They call the current 3-year requirement unwarranted. They complain their corn exports have been hit because of unfair GM restrictions, and Washington has UK government subsidies of Rolls-Royce engines in its sites too. Plenty for the Trade Secretary to consider, and time is pressing.
Well, earlier I spoke to the International Trade Secretary Liam Fox. In the light of that Donald Trump tweet, I asked him which specific British businesses he believes stood to benefit.
We've been initiating a process of trade and investment working groups here, and there are 4 of them. So we've got one on continuity arrangements. These are arrangements that we're a party to as by virtue of our membership of the EU with the US. And we have to ensure that they're replicated to ensure continuity of market access. We've been looking at areas where we can make short-term breakthroughs in liberalisation while we're still in the EU.
But just in terms of the businesses or the sectors, who are you thinking of now?
So the third area is the preparation for a free trade agreement. So we'll be looking, we've now got working groups looking across all the normal sectors of a free trade agreement to see where the opportunities might exist. And then our 4th group is looking at where we can work bilaterally to improve market access for both the US and the UK across the global markets. So it's not a single focus at this point. It's great to have the enthusiasm of the American side in the process, and it's been very evident in the warmth by which we've been received here, but we're still a long way from being able to set out details of where we think the major breakthroughs would come. That's why we have officials.
We know that the Treasury's asked you to show how all this free trade will bring more value than any trade that is lost from the EU. Have you produced that?
Well, I don't accept the premise of the question because it makes the assumption that we will lose value from our trade with the European Union.
Well, we have to lose either the EU deal or the America deal.
No, we don't. No, we don't have to lose anything at all.
So you think we can have both?
We haven't begun our negotiations with the EU yet on a future free trade agreement. And we begin from a very good position of 0 tariffs and absolute regulatory equivalence. So that it technically removes a lot of the barriers to difficulty. We are aiming that we will have a very open and comprehensive trading deal with the European Union. And our aim is to give all our businesses the same rights of access they have today. Now, how possible that will be, we won't know until we begin the negotiations in October. At the same time, we will want to see how we can get increased access to other markets, including the United States, but perhaps even more crucially, how we can work with countries like the United States to open up the global economy in things like services, which will matter a lot to the UK economy.
But your belief is that no value will be lost over losing the EU?
I hope that no value will be lost. That's what we're aiming for. That's what we're aiming for. And of course, it makes no sense to have an assumption that you'll be at one end of the spectrum rather than the other. So what we're aiming for is an open, liberal, comprehensive agreement with the European Union, which is in both our interests to have, both for European producers as well as British producers, and at the same time to have a good agreement with the United States and to open up the global economy. And the reason for that is the global economy is sluggish. Global trade's growing at only 1.3% at the present time. We must get that up because we've got to see a more open trading environment or our exporters will suffer.
Trade is abstract, it is complicated, and I know that you accuse us, the media, of obsessing over chicken, but the reason we talk about chicken is it's tangible. People actually understand that as an issue. So is it true that we will change our regulations, our food standards, to accommodate a deal with America?
We've no intentions of reducing our standards. We've said on a number of occasions that we think that British standards and protection for the consumer,
so you will
for the
then
environment, for the workers.
Rule out chlorine-washed chicken. It's a very simple thing.
There is no health issue with that. The European Union has said that is perfectly safe.
So we could accept that then?
The issue lies around some of the secondary issues of animal welfare, and it's perfectly reasonable for people to raise that, but it will come much further down the road. We will be looking at those issues
just give
much
us a
further
sense,
down the
because
road.
this is something that people can actually understand. Will you say it's fine, we don't need that regulation that the EU currently has, we will be prepared to accept whatever the chicken is washed in because we believe that is the right way to go, it makes food cheaper and it's a deal with the US?
We'll want to ensure that the scientific advice that we have ensures proper protection for British consumers, because dropping our standards is not the way for
right? I mean,
not the way for Britain to
proceed. The EU has a preventative strategy, so it doesn't believe that chlorine-washed chicken is the right thing to have in the EU. Will that change under Liam Fox's trade deal? Can you rule that out?
Well, I can rule out that we will be dropping our standards on consumer protection or environmental protection or on animal welfare. These are all perfectly reasonable things for people to look at. But in terms of where we will be on specifics by the time we finish a free trade agreement, which could be 2-3 years by the time it's concluded and implemented, depending on what happens with the rest of our relationship with the EU, it's too early to say. But you can say on a general principle that we are not going to be the low regulation alternative that some people have suggested.
Chicken is just obviously one of a list, and we could also be looking at GM crops. Will we say we will now accept GM crops? Will we be accepting hormone-fed beef, for example?
You're asking me the same question in a different way. These are elements that we will look at much further down. These are things that you look at in the agricultural section of an agreement.
But we could be in a process that will now accept GM crops or hormone-fed beef. That is somewhere we could be, right?
Well, we'll want to look at what does science tell us, what is the best protection for our consumers, what's the best protection for our environment, and myself and my colleagues will look at that across government. And we're not going to jump to conclusions right now, because that wouldn't be an appropriate way to carry out a negotiation.
I mean, the US wants us to stop subsidising Rolls-Royce engines. They're made in Derby. Will we do that to help win a US trade deal?
Well, it's a negotiation, and we'll want to see what we can get from the American side. They'll want to see what they can get from us, and we're not going to be giving anything away that would be detrimental to the UK producers, our economy, or our consumers. Why would we do that?
Because the whole idea of Brexit, the line that we were fed, was taking back control. Now we're in a position where you cannot rule out that we might have chlorine-washed chicken, you cannot rule out we might have GM crops, you cannot rule out beef-fed or hormone-fed beefs. Why are we in a position where we seem to be going along with whatever a superpower does, whatever principles or standards or lower standards America is suggesting we might have to accept? That's the question people want to know if we're taking back control.
What you're suggesting is that we have to stick with whatever the European Union tells us we have in terms of legacy. We'll make the right decisions for the UK. We will decide for the UK what is best, not what is best for the US, not what is best for the European Union, but what's best for the United Kingdom, and we will take all those areas into account.
And the US model might be the better model for us than the current EU regulations model.
The British model will be the best model for Britain.
Liam Fox. Well, back now to the political storm here in Washington.